Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life podcast. I'm Mary Crean, and I'm flying solo today. But that's okay because, wow, do we have an interesting guest. And she's more than interesting. She's also my friend. I'd love to introduce her right now. Her name is Ellen Last. She's a product strategist, currently leading a product team in higher education technology. She's also a storyteller and an aspiring stand-up comedian. So we must hear about the aspiring comedian comment. Ellen, welcome to Prime Life. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. I am so happy to be here. As you said, I am all those things. I'm an onion. I have many layers. I'm also a mom. I have been working in technology software development for the last 15 or so years in various industries. And while, yes, we are working in technology, for me, it's really about the people that we're solving problems with. And that's really kind of where I've played professionally, and am now working in technology for a higher education payments platform, which is an interesting space. Higher ed is changing rapidly. And when I'm not working, as you mentioned, I've really been leaning into storytelling. I tell stories live and in person in shows locally here in Hartford. And I have just started dabbling in stand-up comedy, but that's kind of where I'm looking to grow right now.
So before we dive into stand-up comedy, which I'm very intrigued about, and also I give you a lot of credit because that takes a lot of courage. Tell us a little bit about what storytelling actually is and why is it important?
Yeah, storytelling has definitely been having a moment, I would say, in the last few years. And while it's been talked about a lot in business, it's really a lifelong skill. And as you age, and I'm going to be 45, I'm going to say it, I'm going to be 45 next month, I've got some years behind me. The more you age, the more stories you have, and not just stories, because lessons, right? Things to share. And that's really what storytelling is about, right? There can be humor, there can be sadness, but ultimately it's about transformation and going through experiences, human experiences, and that's what other people relate to. It's a lifelong skill that we can be always working on and improving.
Well, I love that. And I also believe that storytelling really can transcend barriers and open up opportunities, especially cross-generationally. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. One thing that, and I'll share, I went to the Moth in Boston for the first time this past week. I didn't get the opportunity to tell a story. For those that don't know, this is a big, very popular show in cities worldwide. There's a podcast all around it, and people go and they put their name in the hat, and they get called. I did not get called, so I'm going to have to go back and get my name called. But the one thing, as they're introducing the show, they really focus on that transformational experience. And that's what can bridge the generations, right? I was actually just reading an article today about, lessons for young people, which is talk to older people. They have a lot of experiences they can share with you. And also how you share those experiences matters, right? I went on vacation in 1992, but there also were things that happened that impacted you, that made you change, that maybe the plan did not go as expected and you had to adapt. And it's how we articulate those experiences and those stories to others, to younger generations, is how it's going to actually relate and have them reflect and maybe act differently or in a new way.
What is it about storytelling that will actually make them stick, especially after time has passed? And I think that I also, spend a fair amount of time, as you do, in the community, working with nonprofits, for example. And I'm always saying, let's talk more about the why than the what. Let's tell stories so people remember about our mission. And the same can really apply to businesses. So what do you think that good sticking piece is for people to integrate into their storytelling that will be memorable forever?
I think number one, it's vulnerability, right? You don't want to go out there telling stories about how you saved a cat from a burning building and you're the hero, right? A really impactful story is when you have that vulnerability to say, I was this way, or I did this wrong thing, and because of what I went through, I changed, I learned, I went through a transformation. And I think that's the thing that scares people the most, right? I don't want to. And when we talk about storytelling, well, I do it frequently on stage. That is not the norm. The expectation is not that everybody gets up on stage and tells story, but to get up on stage or even to tell in a group of people, a period of time where you weren't proud of what you did is not easy, but it's relatable because we all have these moments that we're not proud of. But that's well and good. That's good. We want that because if we change and we learn from that, that's the whole point. And so being able to share those moments with others is relatable, and it gives people other hope and encouragement and inspiration.
I would believe sometimes there's a little bit of embarrassment perhaps that could go with some of those vulnerable moments and stories. But I would also like to ask you, because I know I've done this myself, I don't know that I really have any good stories to tell people. So how do you unwind that, or how do you help other people unwind that?
Totally. That's I hear that so much, and people say, Ellen, you have so many stories. I do not have an exceptional life. I live a very normal life. The truth and reality of it is we all have stories, and they might, our lives might feel mundane, but we are constantly battling with, struggling with, challenged with different things. Even at the Moth the other night, one woman told a story of transformation that centered around a pair of tweezers she used for 20 years to pluck her chin hairs. Okay. I mean, some people might not think that that's a story. She was annoyed at her husband for using them for a plumbing fix, fixing the plumbing. I mean, it was hilarious. There was some transformation that went on in there, which ultimately was her having to get happy with a new pair of tweezers that were never going to be like the pair of tweezers that she had, right? She identified this mundane thing that happened in her life as a story and connected it, right, to a transformation or something that she went through and reflected on.
But what was it really that she did that made it, like you were saying, oh, but it was hilarious and it was interesting? And then I'm going to also say to you, you and I have had so many conversations, but there have been times that you've shared things with me and I've been in stitches because the way you tell them, and you're not embellishing them, but you sometimes change your voice tones, and like I'm rolling around on the ground hysterical. Some of those have been like, I don't know if I can bring up your knee situation because that wasn't a good thing. But the story and the way you told me, even though I was sorry that you hurt your knee pretty significantly, the way you told the story, I remember it so well. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it's really it's in like the place setting, right? When you're relating that story, you want people to be able to see and feel and touch, right? So when I tell the story, and what you're referring to is I tore my ACL while skiing this past winter, and my cousin Debbie, she might listen to this podcast, she might not. It's okay either way. She was distracting me on the mountain, and that was how I fell. And that was part of the story that was funny of how I related it. But it's really about setting the scene, right? So that you can see me skiing next to my cousin Debbie, right? And she's yelling something at me and I can't understand it. And I'm kind of reenacting it a little bit for you. And to your point, maybe a little bit of embellishment. So, I think that's part of it, right? Is putting you in the scene and adding some of those details that maybe they weren't funny at the time, but we can look back and they're funny now.
So specifically, what are some of those skills that you would suggest that people hone in on? I think you alluded to making people like feel like they're there, they're experiencing whatever it is you're experiencing. But can you talk or elaborate a little bit more on that?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Sure. Sometimes when people are telling stories, they'll start by telling you they're going to tell you a story. You don't need to do that, right? Just literally, starting on when I get on stage, my stories will start with something like, it's the spring of December 2000, or it's the spring of 2013, and I'm just leaving the doctor's office after hearing I'm going to have a baby boy that coming December, right? So you didn't even know I was starting a story. I've just placed you in there. And the other thing that makes a story really impactful is almost thinking about, you almost want to in some ways continuously set up your whoever's listening to you, whether it's an audience, a group of people, or your grandchild, right? You want to set them up, like make them think you're going in a certain direction, right? I'm skiing, it's a beautiful day with my cousin, we're enjoying this lovely day. You think, it's going to be a joyous occasion, right? Something's going to take a raw turn. And it's kind of those cuts, those setups, and then taking you in the different direction. That's what keeps people hooked in it, right? And it's memorable because you're taking them on a little bit of an emotional journey. Another strategy that I use that's related to that is when I'm thinking about a story, however I start it, where I end it, it's going to be in the opposite place of where I started it. Right. So if I'm, the story I tell about having a son and not being so excited about it, it starts with me being absolutely devastated, thinking my life of having girls, in this joyous girl life is over. And it ends with me being so obsessed with my son. And he's actually much sweeter to me than my daughter. Right. So it's like we start and end in two opposite places. And over the course of the story, you have gone up, you've gone down. You don't know where you are, but it's that emotional journey that makes you remember it.
I love that. How can we use storytelling to help us with transitions in our life? Now, on Prime Life Podcast, we talk a lot about longevity, aging, living longer, living better. So how could individuals who are listening to this podcast, who may be in that category, which I am,
Mm.
How can we use that?
Yeah, absolutely. Transitions are like, that's what storytelling is all about. So it's the perfect time to be kind of just reflecting and thinking about, what were those transformational moments in my life? If I were to kind of break my life up into stages, like what caused those transitions? What was I before? What was I after? What were the events that triggered those changes or those realizations? And they could be something mundane. For example, for me, not that tearing your ACL is not mundane. However, it did happen at a point in my life where I was, and you know this, I was just running ragged. I was exhausting myself. I was burnt out.
Yeah.
And when this happened, I thought this would not be the worst time for this to happen. It was actually the best time. I needed that break to kind of see more clearly what was going on in my life. But I,
Mhm.
until going through that, healing, recovering, getting a new job, that I was able to see it.
Yeah. So let's flip a little bit and talk a little bit about the stand-up comedy. Because when you told me, we were out to dinner with the hubbies, and you shared that you were doing stand-up comedy. Now, I wasn't completely surprised. I really wasn't, based on your personality and that you are someone that growth mindset, you like to try a lot of different things, you're a real go-getter, but I said to myself, "Oh, that takes a lot of courage. I would be frightened to death that I wouldn't be funny." And plus, like, what was it that came into your life that you said, "I want to try stand-up comedy"?
Yeah, all great questions. There's several kind of, I think, colluding factors that have made me want to take the plunge. And I mean, I have really just started to dip my toe. I most recently did open mic night at the Elbow Room in West Hartford. It's a Tuesday night tradition. I plan to get back up there again. It was not good. The point was not to be good. The point was to kind of get up there and see how it felt. In my journey of telling stories, while I just talked about how they all have an element of transformation, my stories also, because I really appreciate humor, always have a humorous twist to them. And the thing that really gets me going when I'm telling the stories, the thing that, fuels my passion for it, is hearing that audience laugh. I just love to make people laugh, maybe because I love to laugh so much. But when I am the cause of the laughter, nothing makes me happier. And at the same time, so I had always had an aspiration. I watched Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I was inspired by that fictional story. And I also have a friend, Rachel, who not this past summer, the summer before, called me and she said, "I want to do comedy." And I said, "Great, I do too." And so we've become accountability partners. I think that's a big thing too, right? We try to meet regularly on a night we call Mom Com and try to talk through some of our stuff. And I wouldn't have got up on that stage if she hadn't led the way, and we did it together. And to your point, it's just a continue. I am a growth mindset person. I recently read a book called Tiny Experiments. I think I told you about it. And it talks about how there's so many different directions that we can be growing in, and we should be doing tiny experiments to try different things and see if they are for us. And so this is a tiny experiment that I'm venturing into to see where it goes. I have no idea where.
Well, I do love that. And I will say, even though I haven't tried stand-up comedy, and you know, Ellen, you've watched me along the way, I tend to try different things too. And, sometimes I've wished that I'm better at things, but I know that repetition, exercise, muscle memory, you and I talk about exercise quite a bit, that does definitely help to get better. And again, it's about being willing to put yourself out there, understand it may not go well, but it's like riding a bike when you're a kid. Like, you fall, but you get up, you get back on your bike because it's so much fun and you love to ride it. So again, it's about, okay, I'm not going to just give up. I'm going to keep pursuing being resistant, being resilient, all the kinds of things that you are. that I've watched you over the years accomplish so many things. What would you say to give some tips about? I want to get started with the storytelling, and I may even dip my toe into the comedy routine. What steps would you recommend that an individual takes that's not so scary?
Absolutely. And that's where I've started with comedy, right? First is just immersing yourself in the content. So I say I've become a student of comedy, right? So I ask people about comedians that they like. I have now I have a feed in my socials, right, of comedians that come up. And that gives me models of what other folks are doing, but also just inspiration, right? If you're not engaging with it, your inspiration for it just kind of like naturally dies out. So I think that's one. The Moth is a great place to start. It's a podcast. There's literally thousands of stories. So just listening to how people who do this as a thing, how they put a story together. There are books on books on books. Matt Dix, who is becoming somewhat of a local celebrity, has really been kind of my mentor in this. It's he who has gotten me into storytelling. So he's written several books, one called Storyworthy. There's many books out there. There are even tools now. We have AI. You and I talk about AI all the time. Matt has
We do.
Matt has a tool now called Portrait. I don't have AI write my stories, but I have AI be a coach for me, right?
That's interesting.
I wrote this story. Can you suggest some areas where I might punch it up or how I might really drive home the lesson that I learned? And it might give me some suggestions. You can use it just like like a human coach you would, right? I can't have access to Matt Dix all the time. I have access to other things that can give me a different perspective and give me other ideas for enhancing it.
I love that. That's interesting. I never thought about using AI in that format or for that reason. So I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but who are some of your favorite comedians that, when you listen to them, you're like, that's really good. I may want to borrow a little bit of the style.
Absolutely. One, I have she's my, guru, Jenny Slate. Some people say I remind I remind them of her, which is to me the biggest compliment. She's just so herself. I have a lot of energy inside this small, body, physical stature. And she just puts it all out there. She comes on stage, she lets her energy flow. And she's weird. She is admittedly weird. And she talk about being vulnerable. She just puts her quirks out there and people really relate to it. And there's a lot of humility there too. And then, just very common one, and my husband just bought tickets and I was so excited, is Nate Bargatze, very popular now, but his delivery is just impeccable. Talk about, delivering in a way that I think I'm going in this direction. And then he just takes you in a completely different direction. And that's kind of the hilarious part about it. So I think it's at one of the casinos, this fall, like maybe next summer. So it's crazy. It's far away, but I can't wait to go see him.
Do you ever use comedy and storytelling? So they're kind of two different questions in a way in your strategy work.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When we talk about strategy, we're just determining how we're going to get somewhere. You need to bring people on board with that. And so storytelling, you're telling about the transformation that we're going to undergo by following the strategy or implementing the strategy that we've gone on. So it follows me everywhere I go. And as far as humor is concerned, I think, every company has its own culture. I really believe humor in the workplace is so, so important. We spend so much time with our colleagues. We have to be having fun, laughing, and not taking, most of us are not curing cancer. So we have to be having fun.
No, I love that. Remember that book you suggested quite some time ago, Humor Seriously?
Yes.
And I love that book. I actually want to reread it because they did apply that humor seriously in the workplace. There were, and also what I liked about the book, understand like the kind of humor you bring to the table.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
you don't have to say, well, I want to be like that. It's like, be yourself. And I think that authenticity the thread that I've been pulling from what you've said is exactly, I think, the thread to pull. Is there anything before we close the program and I ask you the last question that you want to say or give insights or inspiration to those maybe who are thinking about retirement or unretiring or just going through a different phase in their life and they need some extra presence and extra presentation skills, if you will? Can you share any tidbits?
Yeah, I think one, you are interacting with people every day, right? Whether it's with family or meeting up with friends for coffee, you have an audience for your stories at your fingertips. And so I think just taking just practicing, try when you tell a story to a friend, tell it this way. Then you see a former colleague, tell it a different way, and observe what resonates with folks. And really kind of thinking about, it's not about putting on a performance, but just thinking about how you're communicating what you've learned in your life. I think, and it's interesting because I have parents that have just gone through retirement. So I've been, I'm very much in these conversations with them. And it's very interesting, honestly, to see how differently each of my parents have approached retirement. I wish my dad would look at it as less of an end and more as the beginning of a new chapter. Right. And it's funny, he came to the Moth hoping that I would get picked the other day because he lives in the Boston area. And I know that he has been toying with the idea of getting up on the stage to tell a story. He'd be phenomenal. He gets asked by his friends he has officiated weddings. He has unfortunately given several eulogies at friends' weddings. So he has been practicing this and he's phenomenal at it. So, I just really encourage, I'm not there yet, but I'm observing it, and I see it as such an opportunity for him to tap into stuff he couldn't do in his years of lawyering. And there's still so much to experience, and he has so much to share at this phase with others and such an impact to make. So, I guess just trying to look at it with that mindset and leaning into those tiny experiments and sharing your stories wherever you go, because they will have an impact.
I love that. Well, maybe there's a potential father-daughter combo. Who knows, right? You never know. You never know. I mean, I could see it, right? And I love that you shared, your father was a lawyer and, now he has this new opportunity. And I love that he went to the Moth with you, hoping that you would get picked and you didn't. That's okay, but you'll be back next time because both of you don't live too far from Boston where you can go. So, Ellen, our last question, which we ask everyone who comes on Prime Life Podcast, especially you, okay? You have a tremendous educational background. You've done a lot of interesting things. I know you've been with a lot of tech companies, but you can really do anything that you want. You've done design thinking. I know you implement that into your strategy. Why do you wake up every day and do what you do as it relates to either your strategy work or your storytelling, again, going into that next chapter of the stand-up comedy? Why do you do it?
At the end of the day, I'm a people person. So when I wake up in the morning, my whole intent of the day is how can I connect with people, make new relationships, help other people connect. And that's what my storytelling about. That's what my comedy is about. At work, I think I play that role as well. I'm really committed to people's growth. I want to see people successful. And, I think it's just really about what are the different ways in which I can positively impact others to help them on their journey.
Well, I know you've helped me on my many journeys, and it's been enjoyable. And I always look forward to be around you because you're bubbly, you're funny, and you're also very truthful. And you always say that feedback is the best gift you can give, and you're always good regarding feedback as well. And you also made me think before we close out, you've met my son Evan virtually. And when he was in high school many years ago, he did theater and he found that comedy was his thing. As a matter of fact, the first time I saw him on stage, A Midsummer Night's Dream, I looked at my husband and I said, I think that was Evan. And he said, oh, I don't think that was. And it was Evan. He threw himself onto the stage and he was hilarious. And watching him over those years, and perhaps maybe he may get back to comedy. Who knows? So you kind of inspired that in me to talk about Evan today and share that with you. It's been a great conversation. I hope, Ellen, you'll come back and update us on your stand-up comedy and your story and your storytelling, because I know you've been asked to do some really cool storytelling at some very unique and high-end places. That said, thank you for joining me today. And to all of our guests, keep listening, share the podcast with your friends and family. And we look forward to our next one next week on the Prime Live podcast. Thank you so much. And everyone have a great day.